Welcome to this deep dive, and we're going to be looking at the world of George Orwell,
Okay.
specifically two of his most famous works,
Right.
Animal Farm and 1984.
Great.
And we've got some excerpts from literary analysis comparing both novels.
Sounds good.
So we're going to be unpacking the historical context surrounding these books, how they were received, and some surprising attempts to suppress them.
Oh,
And then we'll discuss what makes them so relevant even today.
it's interesting to consider how these novels considered classics now weren't immediately embraced
Yeah,
when they were first published.
right.
Animal Farm, in particular, faced some serious opposition.
It does seem strange considering how many people have read it now.
Yeah.
I was surprised to learn that publishers, especially left-leaning ones, initially rejected Animal Farm outright.
It really highlights the challenge of confronting uncomfortable truths,
Right.
even for those who claim to support those truths.
Yeah.
For example, Victor Gollancz, a well-known leftist publisher who had worked with Orwell before,
Uh-huh.
refused to publish it.
It makes you wonder what he saw in those pages that made him so uncomfortable.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have this group of Ukrainian socialists who
Right.
immediately recognized Animal Farm's significance. They were living in post-war refugee camps, and they reached out to Orwell,
Wow.
asking for permission to distribute the book among the refugees.
That's interesting.
It must have really resonated with their experiences.
Orwell, recognizing the potential impact of his work, granted them permission.
Okay.
He even wrote a special introduction for this Ukrainian edition,
Wow.
emphasizing its relevance to their situation.
Yeah.
It's a powerful example of how art can transcend borders and speak to universal experiences of oppression and resistance.
Unfortunately, that's not where the story ends.
Oh.
American authorities actually seized those Ukrainian copies of Animal Farm.
Really?
And get this, they gave them to the Red Army to be burned.
What?
This was after World War II had ended.
Wow.
It makes you wonder how threatened they felt by a satirical novel about talking animals.
This incident shows us the complicated political landscape of the Cold War,
Yeah.
and how even a seemingly simple story like Animal Farm could be seen as dangerous.
Right.
It really makes you reconsider the book's impact and the forces at play during that era, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It's a stark reminder of how information can be manipulated and controlled for political gain.
Right.
Sadly, attempts to control Orwell's work didn't end with Animal Farm.
Oh.
1984 was also targeted, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
The publisher was pressured by the Book of the Month Club to remove the appendix
Huh.
titled The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism.
I could see why book club might find that a little dense,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
Yes. They considered the appendix too politically charged,
Okay,
too Trotskyist for their liking.
I see.
They wanted to soften the book's message to make it more acceptable to a wider audience,
Yeah.
even if it meant sacrificing its intellectual depth.
Orwell, though, refused to compromise his principles,
Good for him.
even if it meant losing out on a potentially lucrative deal.
Right.
He was really committed to his art and its message.
Yeah.
But beyond just removing sections, there were attempts to twist the narrative of Animal Farm altogether.
Oh, really?
The CIA-backed cartoon adaptation is a great example of that.
Okay.
They actually removed the ending where Farmer Jones, representing the old order, returns.
Wow.
This fundamentally changes the story's meaning,
Right.
turning it into straightforward anti-communist propaganda.
It's almost unbelievable how a story like Animal Farm could be manipulated
Right.
to serve such different agendas.
But let's shift gears and dive into the powerful themes that make these novels timeless.
Okay.
Both Animal Farm and 1984 explore worlds where hope and progress are crushed
Right.
under oppressive regimes.
The destruction of the windmill in Animal Farm is such a strong symbol of that.
Yeah.
It represented the animals' hope for a better future,
Sure.
a future where they were in control,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately it was sabotaged and destroyed,
Yeah.
leaving the animals demoralized and defeated.
Right.
I think it can be seen as a metaphor for failed utopian projects throughout history.
You really feel for the animals in that moment.
Yeah.
Their initial enthusiasm and then the crushing realization that their revolution had failed.
Right.
It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
And the corruption of the pigs is so cleverly portrayed
Yeah.
through the altered commandment about alcohol.
Yes. At first, it was no animal shall drink alcohol,
Right.
which seemed clear enough.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, the pigs, as they consolidated their power,
Right.
changed the commandment to
Yeah.
no animal shall drink alcohol to excess.
A subtle shift in language,
Right.
but it allowed them to indulge their own desires
Right.
while maintaining a facade of equality.
Exactly.
It's a chilling example of how those in power manipulate language to justify their actions.
Absolutely. And then you have Boxer, the hardworking horse, who is so dedicated to the cause.
Right.
He embodies the spirit of the working class, their unwavering loyalty and dedication, but also their vulnerability to exploitation.
His ultimate fate, being betrayed and sold to the glue factory, is incredibly sad.
Yeah.
I think his story really resonates with the exploitation of labor throughout history.
Right.
It makes you wonder if even the most dedicated and hardworking can be betrayed like that.
Yeah.
Is any revolution truly safe from corruption?
That's a question that haunts both of these novels.
Right.
And while Animal Farm uses allegory and satire,
Yeah.
1984 confronts these themes head-on
Right.
with even more chilling imagery.
Okay.
Take, for instance, that opening scene with the Ministry of Truth.
Right.
A massive white pyramid with the slogans, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength."
Yeah.
It sends shivers down your spine.
It really captures the feeling of a totalitarian regime where language itself is twisted and used as a weapon.
Right.
And poor Winston constantly struggling to think for himself in a world where even thoughts are policed.
Yeah.
He sits down to write in his diary but can't articulate his thoughts.
It's like he's paralyzed by fear and self-censorship. He's
Huh?
surrounded by constant surveillance,
Mhm.
the telescreens watching his every move.
It raises a question for you.
Okay.
In a world of increasing data collection and algorithms,
Yeah.
do you ever feel like your own thoughts and behaviors are being monitored?
It's a question we all need to consider.
And yet, even in this oppressive environment, there are these fleeting moments of human connection that offer a glimmer of hope,
Oh.
like Winston's encounter with O'Brien,
Uh-huh.
where they share a knowing glance,
Yeah.
a silent acknowledgement of shared rebellion.
It's a brief but powerful connection that gives Winston a sense of hope.
Right?
Have you ever experienced a moment like that?
Yeah.
Where a simple look conveyed a shared understanding of unspoken thoughts?
Sure.
Especially in a situation where you felt like you couldn't speak freely? These small acts of defiance and connection are what fuel Winston's desire to resist.
On the other hand, you have the Parsons family,
Okay.
a chilling example of how fear and surveillance can become normalized. Mrs. Parsons, constantly afraid of stepping out of line,
Right.
is even afraid of her own children.
And her children are part of the junior spies.
Right.
Fully embracing party ideology and reporting anyone suspected of unorthodoxy.
Wow.
It's a terrifying example of how totalitarian regimes can infiltrate even the most intimate parts of life,
Right.
turning families and neighbors against each other.
It creates a world where trust is eroded and everyone is a potential informant.
Yeah,
It's a chillingly relevant theme in today's world, wouldn't you say?
absolutely. These themes of propaganda, government overreach, and suppression of dissent
Yeah.
are all too familiar in the 21st century.
Right.
Orwell's novels serve as a warning
Right.
about the dangers these things pose to individual freedom and critical thinking.
It's a reminder to be vigilant and aware of the forces that seek to control and manipulate us.
Yeah.
But it's not all bleakness and despair, is it?
Yeah.
There are moments of beauty and humanity that shine through even in the darkest of times.
Right. You're right. It's not all bleak. One element of hope Orwell offers is the presence of the Pearls in 1984.
Yeah.
They're the vast majority of Oceania's population,
Right.
but they're kept distracted and uninformed.
It's interesting how they're almost treated as a separate species, like they're not even worth the party's time or attention.
That's the strange part.
Yeah.
The party claims to have freed the Pearls from the capitalists,
Right.
but they treat them almost like animals,
Now,
incapable of thought or action.
and yet Winston sees the Proles as a potential source of change. He believes that if they ever woke up to their own power,
Yeah.
their sheer numbers they make up, 85% of the population, could be enough to overthrow the party.
It's a glimmer of hope.
Right.
But it's a hope constantly challenged by the Pearls' own apathy. Remember that scene where they're rioting over saucepans?
Yeah.
For a moment, their anger seems like it could turn into a real uprising.
It feels like they're so close to realizing their collective power.
Yeah.
You almost believe they might actually unite and challenge the party.
But it's fleeting. Their anger quickly fizzles out into petty squabbles,
Oh,
showing their lack of unity and their inability to see the bigger picture.
right.
It's a reminder of how easily people can be distracted and divided,
Yeah.
even when they share common grievances.
Their focus is pulled so easily to those immediate concerns.
Right.
Yet there's something about the proles' simple pleasures
Uh-huh.
that really stands out against the party's constant fear and control.
Okay.
They find joy in things like music, family, and even a bit of gambling.
Exactly. It's like they haven't been completely stripped of their humanity.
Right.
They still have a capacity for love and connection, a primal life force that the party can't entirely stamp out.
Winston, trapped in the party's web, seems to crave that kind of simple, genuine connection.
Yeah.
Which brings us to his relationship with Julia.
Okay.
It's more than just a love affair, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Right.
It's a rebellion against the party's control.
Their first encounter in the countryside is incredibly symbolic,
Right.
making love in a natural setting surrounded by nature.
Yeah.
It stands in such stark contrast
Yeah.
to the sterile, controlled world of the city.
Exactly.
It represents a reclaiming of human instincts, a rejection of the party's attempts to repress individuality and emotion.
And there's that image of the thrush singing in the background, a
Yes.
symbol of freedom and beauty amidst the oppressive regime.
It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's still beauty to be found.
And even Julia's simple desires for real coffee, real sugar white bread
Yeah.
become acts of rebellion against the party's rationing.
It's fascinating how those everyday pleasures, the things we often take for granted,
Right.
take on such significance in a world where everything is controlled.
Their decision to rent the room above Mr. Charrington's shop is another big risk they take. It's driven by their need for privacy, for a space where they can truly be themselves.
That room becomes their sanctuary, a place outside the watchful eyes of Big Brother.
Yeah.
And that old nursery rhyme they find there, oranges and lemons, feels incredibly powerful.
It's a fragment of the past that the party has tried to erase.
Right.
A reminder of a time before Big Brother and constant surveillance.
Right.
It makes you wonder what other pieces of history have been lost or rewritten to fit the party's narrative.
It's a reminder that history and culture are so important to our sense of self.
Yeah.
And attempts to rewrite the past are also attempts to control the present and the future,
Exactly.
which makes the betrayal that comes later all the more devastating.
The revelation that Mr. Charrington, who seemed like such a harmless old man,
I know.
is actually a member of the Thought Police is one of the most shocking moments in the book.
It shatters that sense of security that Winston and Julia had built in that room,
Right.
showing how far the party's reach extends.
Yeah.
And then their arrest. It's so brutal.
Yeah, it is.
It reminds us of the harsh realities of living under a totalitarian regime.
This marks a dark turning point in the novel.
Okay.
Winston is taken to the Ministry of Love,
Right.
where he will face the true horrors of the party's power.
The Ministry of Love.
Hmm.
What a chilling name for a place where love is twisted into torture
Right.
and loyalty is enforced through pain and fear. What happens to Winston in there?
Winston is subjected to physical and psychological torture. He's forced to confront his deepest fears and betray the one person he truly loved.
Wow.
This leads us to the concept of Room 101,
Okay.
a place that embodies the ultimate psychological control.
Room 101, it's a concept that's haunted readers for decades.
It's a place where prisoners are confronted with their worst nightmares, their deepest fears, and forced to betray their own values in order to survive.
It's terrifying to think that the party understands the power of fear so well
Yeah.
and uses it so ruthlessly to break people's spirits.
And it's O'Brien Winston's torturer who becomes a sort of twisted teacher,
Okay.
representing the party's power.
Right.
He forces Winston to embrace doublethink.
Doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. It's such a mind-bending concept,
Yeah.
and yet it feels so relevant today.
Yeah.
We're bombarded with conflicting information all the time.
Right.
How do we even know what to believe anymore?
That's the insidious thing about doublethink. It undermines our ability to think critically and to trust our own judgment.
Right.
And then there's that famous scene where O'Brien forces Winston to believe that 2 + 2 + 5.
That scene has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful symbol of the party's absolute control over truth and reality.
Right.
If they can make you believe that, what else can they make you believe?
It's a chilling reminder that even the most basic truths can be manipulated and distorted to fit a particular agenda.
And what happens to Winston after he's released?
Wow.
Is there any hope for him?
He's released, but he's a shell of his former self.
Yeah.
He encounters Julia again, but their connection is gone. They're both emotionally numb, broken by the party's cruelty.
Oh.
It's a heartbreaking ending that leaves the reader with a sense of profound loss.
It seems like any spark of rebellion, any sense of individual identity has been completely extinguished. Does Orwell offer any hope at all? Any way to resist such overwhelming power? It's a crushing defeat, isn't it? To see Winston, who fought so hard for his individuality, reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. But even amidst this darkness, Orwell does offer some glimmers of hope, doesn't he? I keep thinking back to those powerful lines about the proles and their enduring spirit, their capacity for love and joy, despite their hardships.
Yes. Amidst the bleakness, that's an important element to consider. Winston sees in the proles a kind of primal life force that the party hasn't been able to fully extinguish. They haven't been completely indoctrinated. They still experience simple pleasures, human connection. There's a resilience there that's worth exploring.
It's like they represent a kind of raw humanity that persists even in the face of oppression. I'm thinking of that scene where Winston observes the red-armed woman singing in the courtyard. It's such a stark contrast to the cold, emotionless world of the party.
That scene really highlights the contrast, doesn't it? Orwell seems to suggest that perhaps true hope lies not in grand political movements or organized rebellions, but in these everyday acts of humanity, the simple joys that connect us to one another.
So it's about holding on to the things that make us human, even in the face of oppression.
Precisely. And this brings us to one of the most important messages of Orwell's work, the importance of individual freedom and critical thinking. Both Animal Farm and 1984 serve as cautionary tales about what can happen when we allow ourselves to be manipulated, when we surrender our ability to think for ourselves.
He's warning us about the dangers of propaganda and information control, and how crucial it is to question authority, to challenge the status quo.
Yes, and more than that, it's about actively fighting for the right to think differently, to dissent, to speak truth to power.
That's a fight that feels just as relevant today as it was in Orwell's time. In a world of increasing technological surveillance, how do we safeguard our freedoms and prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating?
It's a question we all need to grapple with. Orwell doesn't give us easy answers, but he does challenge us to confront these uncomfortable truths and to work towards a future where individual freedom and critical thinking prevail.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Orwell's novels provide us with a powerful and thought-provoking look at the human condition and the very real dangers of totalitarianism. They remind us to be critical consumers of information, to cherish our individual freedoms, and to resist any system that tries to control our thoughts and actions. His work is a call to action, reminding us to be aware of the forces that seek to manipulate us and to resist those forces with everything we have.
And it's an invitation to continue exploring these ideas. Delve deeper into Orwell's work and never stop questioning the world around you.
That's our deep dive into the world of George Orwell. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those spirits free.